Hi, everybody. Um, I was told to start off each talk with an image of the cover of your latest book, and so this is an image of the cover of my latest book, which is called Invisible Learning: Toward a New Ecology of Education. But it is printed in Spanish, so it's Aprendizaje Invisible hacia una nueva ecología de la educación. Um, and parts of this actually be translated into English in the next book, which will be called Nomad Society in a little bit. So, you got to cover the book. Don Tapscott always says to show that first. This is the cover that we wanted to use, the original cover that we wanted to use. And the imagery of the package brain is really intended to make the point that, this is not the typical book. And we wanted to play with the industrial model of learning that is really creating many of the problems that we're experiencing today within the education world. But I'm a product of the system. I came out of it. So hello, my name is John. I came out of Package Brain. I jumped through all the hoops. I'm a faculty member at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Organizational Leadership, Policy, and Development, and also Innovation Studies and the Master of Liberal Studies graduate programs at our university. I also run a thing called Education Futures. So you can read more about that at educationfutures.com. But I'd like to open up with a question with this group of people. We've got 6 people here. And it's really, what do these people have in common? And what they have in common is that none of them survive the educational system, or they're refugees that never survive formal education. Yet they build the futures or building all of our futures. They're telling us what we need to do to reform within education. Walt Disney, for example, was a high school dropout. Woody Allen was kicked out of New York University. On the top right, that's Florence Nightingale. She never had a formal education, but she founded the whole field of modern nursing. Got a European figure on Václav Havel. He was denied access to higher education, period. Bill Gates was a college dropout, and of course, Steve Jobs was a community college dropout as well. But these people all help define what it is that we've been learning and what it is that we've been doing, and have had some very strong influences and inputs into our educational systems today. So I think what that group shows us is that schooling doesn't always equate to success. I think that we can all agree that there isn't exactly a precise causal relationship that a high level of education is equivalent to a high level of success. I mean, in the United States, you just go to any coffee shop, a Starbucks or even a Barnes and Noble bookstore, and you can count the number of PhDs and advanced master's degree graduates working as baristas or checkout clerks. But for all of us in this call, I think it's fair to say that we're survivors in formal schooling. We made it. We jumped through all the necessary hoops and passed through exams to earn us entrance into our universities, or to get us entrance into this conference day, this workshop. So supposedly we've all been going through this so we can get better jobs. But I think, as most of us are aware, many of the most successful people never really survived this sort of formal schooling. So the question is, how did they learn? So we ask the question, so what is invisible learning? The first is that it's a socio-technological archetype for new ecology of education. That is, that we're bringing together ideas, we're combining reflections of learning along a continuum. So as the nature of work changes, so does learning with it. Our focus is not restricted to any particular space or moment of learning, but it suggests strategies for combining formal education with non-formal and informal learning. And see here, kind of plotted it out on a spectrum, which encompasses formal, non-formal, informal, serendipitous learning, but also the fuzzy metaspaces in between and the interfaces of how they can combine and remix in new ways. To get very clear in definitions here, formal learning is what we're used to in schools. You have a syllabus, you have a curriculum, you have tests. Non-formal learning is learning that occurs in a formal learning environment, but we don't recognize it. Like this workshop or the seminar or the conference can fall into the category as the learning and outcomes really don't fall into any sort of pre-programmed syllabus structure. And informal learning is semi-structured and occurs in a variety of places through a variety of interactions. This is how we learn cultures and languages etc., etc., etc. It's a very natural way of learning. Then, of course, sometimes you just stumble upon things in a very serendipitous mode, and that's also a learning mode too. The interesting thing is that technology enables us to remix and share these things together in new configurations. So, yes, and it remixes. So, invisible learning remixes forms of learning, including continuous elements of creativity, innovation, collaborative work, experimental laboratories, and other forms of new knowledge production. This recognizes that we have a broadening ecology of options and looks to how we can make the most of them. This ecology is a very important thing. Oh, this slide was animated. I guess it didn't come through okay. I really wanted to highlight that information and communications technologies let us participate and collaborate in new ways. That we have a copy and paste culture that allows us to remix and share new ideas and knowledge. And some of these examples include YouTube, we got blogs, wikis, hip hop music, hip hop culture. It's all about cutting and pasting ideas together to create something new. On these slides, I'm cutting and pasting and remixing themes together. Frank Sinatra came out with an album called Duets that he sang with Bono. It was actually played in the hotel I'm staying at this morning. We're taking, Frank's been long dead, but taking an old recording of his, remixing it with some new sounds and creating something that's really cool, really unique. And of course, Wikipedia is always in a constant state of remixing and hopefully improvement. Invisible learning suggests new applications for technologies. And what I mean by that is that technology needs to be employed purposively to enable learning within a broader framework of globally relevant skills. And again, the focus here is globally relevant. These include skills that increase employability, that promote the emergence of knowledge agents and nomads. That's KNOWMADS. I'll talk about that a little bit. And they also increase the impact of what has been learned. And it's not the answer to all of our problems. We sought out ideas that could be adapted and adopted amongst various contexts, but invisible learning is not suggested as a standard answer to all the problems that we face in education. Rather, this is an invitation to explore new ways of learning. So formal education is traditionally governed from the top down, like through government control, policies, those sort of modes. But invisible learning proposes a revolution of ideas from the bottom up. And these would be like, say, do-it-yourself or user-generated content, problem-based learning, lifelong learning, etc. And we want to be open and provocative. We're not going to pretend to hold any secrets here. We're not going to pretend to have any of the answers, any of the best answers. That this project is really the start of a dialogue that we intend to provoke and inspire a conversation. So in this talk, I'm going to make some predictions of some very specific skills and competencies that we need. But we're not going to make the predictions, but instead I'm going to focus on the pathways that we need to start identifying and acting on them. Okay, next slide. Very cool. So this is a sign from it's from the Walker Art Museum, which is about a couple blocks from my house. And this is a quote from Lawrence Weiner, who incidentally made himself famous by taking dynamite and blowing holes in the California desert. So quite literally, he's talking about bits and pieces put together to present a semblance of a whole. And how this relates to that is that invisible learning is a proto-paradigm. We're still working on putting in the bits and pieces together to see what sort of new reality that we're creating. And we're not quite done yet. So here's some invisible learning facts. Well, some nutritional facts. The first fact that you should be aware of, and this is what frightens me, is that the average weight of an adult American is 80.5 kilograms, and we're getting fatter and fatter. I'm hearing that federal government is now advising us to widen our buses to accommodate fat people. But the other thing really wanted to point on this is that we don't know, we can't say with a sort of set of certainty what the percentage of what we learn that is invisible compared to visible is. John Seeley Brown guesstimates that the ratio might be 5 to 1. That is, for every 6 things that we learn, 5 things were not in formal education. So when we're talking about skills and competencies for future careers, it's likely that most of them are not being developed in our schools. And here we've got a picture of Dr. Cristóbal Cobo, originally from Chile, but now at the University of Oxford, and myself. They're putting this stuff together, and their whole intention is really to create a 365-degree view and a 3D view of the whole, and for also providing tools for building better futures within the invisible learning proto-paradigm. We don't want to just introduce out a proto-paradigm, a meta-theory, and leave people hanging dry, but we also really want to help people with some tools to help them get started. So we also discovered all sorts of initiatives that are pushing the boundaries of the interfaces between formal, non-formal, and formal learning that really challenge our views of how these things work. And I know there's some cool stuff happening in Finland, nearby in Sweden. The Hyper Island program really inspired us. Over here in the Netherlands, there's the Chaos, not the Chaos Pilots are in Denmark. They inspired us too, but also the Nomads Business School in Amsterdam, Bank of Common Knowledge in Spain, the Shibuya University Network in Tokyo, all things that really inspired us. But in our own home areas in the United States and Latin America, there just was not much happening. So for us, it was kind of an inspiring journey to learn about these things. So the first chapter of the book provides a bit of context for looking at invisible learning. And then put this in an ugly framework called Society 1.0 to Society 3.0. Society 1.0 really refers to the industrial or agricultural and industrial society. This is where we had family-based enterprises, kids learned at home, kids worked at home, kids were engaged cross-generationally, adults could learn from kids, and kids found ways to contribute at all economic levels. But then we developed this a little bit further and developed industry, and for very good reasons, we separated kids from factories. You've got a factory, you lose an arm, eye, or you get killed, or awful things are happening to kids. So we put kids into other factories, and we call them schools. This is where kids are lined up in rows. They face in front of the classroom, and the teacher, the absolute knowledge authority on behalf of the state, was there to download information into our heads. And this also carried over into the information age, where we interpreted data. We were very hierarchical in how we organized things. We had siloed jobs and siloed job roles. People worked as industrial cogs and wheels and machines, and we did this to avoid chaos and ambiguity at all costs. And we started to develop towards Society 2.0, which is pretty much what we're experiencing today. This is the knowledge age, and this really started about 20, almost 30 years ago. We started taking information and interpreting it. And when we interpret information, when we create knowledge, it's Michael Poliani in the 1960s really pointed out that it's composed of tacit and explicit elements. And explicit elements kind of like the knowledge that you get out of a book. Tacit knowledge is what you get, say, by riding a bicycle. I can write a book on how to ride a bicycle. It's still not going to teach you how to do that. You combine these two forms together, you get personal knowledge. And it's this personal knowledge that makes us unique and competitive within a variety of contexts. It makes us unique and competitive within our workplaces. And so this is, and also when we get into different social configurations, we construct knowledge socially. And it became really hard to control and manage chaos and ambiguity. But we do see people that were trying to move forward in these things. Areas of knowledge management emerged as a field. But it's taking a 1.0 paradigm to try to steer in the 2.0, and that's failed. You just can't manage knowledge. You can't manage the knowledge that's in people's heads. Now, Society 3.0, which is, I think, the most interesting, is the future that's just around the corner. But we're starting to see bits and pieces of this emerge. And this is really the design and innovation design age, or I like to call it Nomad Society 2. This is where we're taking the knowledge that we have, and we're asking people, so what? So what can you do with it? How do you contextually apply it? If you're able to contextually apply it to do something meaningful, that's called innovation. We're also finding that within knowledge networks, that knowledge itself is very diffused horizontally. And we're starting to see organizations, schools, corporations emerge that are horizontally diffused. And the relationships are becoming less hierarchical rather than they're becoming heterarchical. That if you're an organization, the formal charts may have that traditional pyramid scheme with everybody reporting at the top, but how it actually works, starting more and more organizations is starting to look like spaghetti and meatballs. And the best managers out there are intending to and embracing chaos and ambiguity rather than fighting it. And an important part of this nomad society is that I'm seeing a class of workers emerge that are knowledge workers, but they're highly mobile, a specific individual level knowledge and skills. They're unique and they leverage technologies to navigate and seize on opportunities globally. And I call these people nomads because, like the K and OWMADS, because like nomads that existed before Society 1.0, they are very nomadic. Just kind of like the Japanese ronins, the samurais without a master that take on different jobs, different contexts, and add value to organizations. And I hope you're able to follow me so far. I can't read the comments in the chat box, so if anything comes in, just type something in English. So I'd like to ask the question, why is this a big deal? From my perspective, the United States is that I think we've been very ignorant of these transitions. I mean, how often do we get engaged in conversations and utilize our imagination, our creativity, and innovation? Or how often do we get to put forward policies that make our schools into creative institutions and not factories of test takers? And the answer is we really haven't been getting into that. And Europe also has not been getting into it, except in the field of higher education, where I believe that we are being leapfrogged. All right, then a video here called Meet the Nomads, but that's not going to work because I had to send this over as a PDF. I'll skip that. And I have here a very, very, very ugly chart, but you guys, I assume I'll have access to this now. It really spells out the differences between these paradigms. We're looking at just real briefly, looking at moving from fundamental relationships that used to be very simple and easy to define to those that are complex creative. And I like to use the word teleological because the system itself is becoming so chaotic and complex in itself that it's generating its own goals. You don't need that top-down goal management or layers on these things. And I think that's very inspiring. Conceptualizations of order aren't as hierarchic anymore. Rather, we're asking systems and schools and organizations to self-organize. In fact, in Holland yesterday, visited them on the National Self-Organization Day. This is a really big topic. We're looking for more synergies and to develop more synergies in relationships rather than mechanical transactions. We're being asked to design the world that we live in that's around us rather than having it determined for us. And causality is less linear. That is, used to seem to us that A cause B cause C cause D, but rather it's starting to look anti-causal, where I hold up the newspaper, I don't know what's going on. I've got what's going on in Greece. It looks like B is causing A, which is causing N, which is also causing A, which is causing W. It's just not making much sense. And change process is requiring much more creative destruction within organizations than slow assembly line pace. And the reality is becoming much more contextual than was objective. And of course, much more global than we are local. It's what enables us to have this conversation today. Now I contextualize this a little bit, and I discuss a lot of this stuff in great detail at educationfutures.com, and this chart is really created for primary and secondary education. But really wanted to get to, when we start contextualizing these things, look between the paradigms, we're moving from formal education schooling, where meaning is, what is traditionally dictated to students, and this is more of the U.S. Perspective. I know Finland's a bit different. But we tend to dictate meaning to our students rather than have something that's socially constructed or contextually reinvented. We have to start embracing technology than fighting it or confiscating it from students. We need to enable teaching that goes from teacher to student, student to student, student to teacher, or people utilizing people to work with other people, and that's co-constructivism. And schools will be located everywhere, and not just in bricks, but virtually and in person, but also we need to start building smart learning experiences throughout our environments. And rather than viewing schools as daycare, parents need to view schools as a place for them to learn too. And of course, this is all for preparing people that could be great coworkers, entrepreneurs, instead of assembly line workers. I think this is also creating tensions. They've got our wrapped brain, and the other logo is IBM's Watson, which performed very well in the game show Jeopardy, answering very difficult questions. I think we're starting to see some As humans are being challenged to perform more machine-like, we're seeing machines that start to outperform humans in intellectual tasks. I think it's creating some tensions of maybe meat versus machine, or the individual versus knowledge networks, or just the general. It's really highlighting the problem that we're programming people to operate as machines, but we're trying to get machines to behave more like humans. But in invisible learning, we don't think of this as really an either or question or versus question, but we need to start thinking how humans and machines can collaborate purposively and invisibly to create better futures. Um, Over the past 130,000 years, meat, that's us, our brains, we haven't evolved very much at all in the last 130,000 years. We're in reality we're no more intelligent than we were than prehistoric humans. Our abilities to think hasn't changed a bit since we evolved into our current species. So the human brain hasn't changed its capacity at all. But we look at advances in technologies, in particular, silicon-based technologies or computing technologies, that's following an exponential rate of change and accelerating returns as well. And it's also creating social pressures as well. So computers are changing rapidly, and if we give the doubling pace of Moore's law and continue, I mean, it's more of a suggestion, I guess, but a $1,000 computer would have the computational capacity of the entire universe within 600 years. So it's very likely within our lifetimes that we'll see some machine intelligence even emerge, but also it creates some questions for humans that I think we need to understand ourselves better and the limitations of ourselves. And that another thing is that while the advancements in machine systems can be engineered for exponential growth, that we can't apply the same requirements for advancements in human systems unless we evolve ourselves as humans. And this is a challenge for businesses that demand the same increases in efficiencies from humans that we're getting from machines. Hans Moravec, a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, really cited a paradox that it's really easy to get machines to do tasks that are complex for us. But what's really difficult is to get machines to do the real simple tasks like gardening or operating reception desk or even answering the phone competently. So maybe there's always going to be roles for humans, but it's a bit of a challenge. Now, my paradox is that we're striving to design machines that can behave as humans, but we're also teaching humans to behave as machines. And their entire formal education system treats us as industrial products. It's designed to create factory workers and bureaucrats, but it's not designed to make the most of our capabilities to be imaginative, creative, and to act on them, which is to innovate. So my challenge for us is how can we use information communications technologies to make us smarter? Should we just think about how we can get to human mind and J-curve growth as well? I hope so. We have a way I'd like to go. So how do we create nomadic global citizens through the invisible use of technologies and competencies? How do we teach future generations? If we don't know what jobs exist in the future, what skills and competencies will be needed for future jobs, how can we possibly teach youth today? And so what are the relevant skills and competencies for the 21st century? We're all white belts at creating the future. We do not have any role models to draw from. Nobody's been there. So I think it's up for us, kids and adults, to work together to co-create these futures. I also ask the question, what is the role of mobiles? What is the role of technologies? And I think that one of the things that we uncovered in this work is that the relationship between technologies and education has been overstated. Even the OECD has revealed in a study that there is no conclusive evidence on the effects of technology, or that significant amounts of computer use at school are not associated with higher performance. So the question is, so what is important? And soft skills is an area that we identified as being very important. That the development of soft skills forces us to inquire how we are learning, or how we are learning to learn, rather than what to learn. And these are personal attributes that can enhance an individual's interactions, job performance, and career prospects. It's kind of like interpersonal abilities or emotional intelligence, like being honest or confident, motivated, sociable. Displaying leadership is another soft skill. And these are very hard for schools to teach. And we suspect we've been focused too much on the use of technology for formal learning, and as is, the impact is minimal. So we asked, is technology better suited for non-formal and informal learning, like outside of the classroom? And the answer is yes. With technologies in non-formal contexts, we're able to better support the development of our individual talents. For more on that, I think we can probably get into a discussion later on how we use technologies and tools, including games, to help us develop our individual talents, explore what we enjoy and what really seems to suit us best. But that's kind of more of a one-on-one conversation type thing. And informal education, the result, or the trend has been that we often place technologies in the forefront, which ends up obscuring education. Their presence or even their absence is noted and is very visible. In invisible learning, we invisibilize technologies. It's just part of what we use to help us learn and solve things. And we let the technology or the learning that they obscure actually emerge. Moreover, the invisibilization of technologies connect knowledge. They support knowledge brokering, and they enable the translation of knowledge to beneficial applications, which is innovation. Also, invisible technologies enable us to focus on how to learn, not what to learn. This is the formation of mindware, not hardware or software, but connecting the human element of how we learn. And so this is a chart. I'm not going to really go through it, but it's really looking at just examples of technology of learning at home versus at school, which is kind of formal learning versus something that's less formal or even moving into the invisible learning spectrum. Let you look at that in your free time, in interest of our time. So in the third chapter, we look at some cases and experiences that we could learn from. And the first is that learning occurs in a continuum. Excuse me. Or in a continuum of enriching experiences among different contexts. Also, these forms of learning are not just distinct from each other, but they feed into the construction of broader personal knowledge, which is key. One example, we start to look at things like online learning, is really limited in how it really connects the visible learning spectrum, is that it connects formal and non-formal learning together. We look at augmented reality, it starts to spread out a bit more, connecting formal, non-formal, informal, and serendipitous learning, because you're really tapping into social elements as well as perhaps some formal education schemes that could be blended in. Study abroad. What do you learn when you study abroad? What are the formal, non-formal, informal, and serendipitous elements of understanding the culture that's beyond your own? And there's a real focus on informal learning in that one. And peer-based learning. Teaching each other is something that we do naturally and quite invisibly all the time. As humans, we're always co-teaching and co-learning. It's just what our minds are wired to do naturally. So in the invisible learning space, we're seeing some interesting blends of peer-based learning. One example would be the Shibuya University Network in Japan and the Bank of Common Knowledge in Barcelona. Both are using technologies smartly that facilitate more explicit peer-based teaching and learning, but also provide mechanisms for acknowledging them as well. And those two programs are very inspiring for us. Again, getting back to the IBM Watson example, we're seeing trends where technologies provide new ways for augmenting the limitations of the human mind, able to expand beyond our own limitations. And some of these include augmented reality or automatic real-time translation, i.e. through the iPhone, or information services that are provided by Siri, having the ability to have facts at our fingertips that eliminate our need to rely on rote memorization. And they also allow us to socialize in new and often more global ways, like Twitter, Facebook. These are all modern examples of how these things integrate. So I already gave a few examples of the creative use of mobiles, but we feel that we haven't even begun to tap their full potential. How can we better use them to augment our imaginations, or our creative capabilities, and our capacities to act on it, which would be innovation? So the World Bank, European Union, and OECD have all produced studies that show low results in standardized exams in cases where high use of technologies are brought in schools. So in other words, is that if you expect that bringing technology into formal schools to improve test scores, you're in for a big surprise. But in the invisible learning paradigm, we suggest that using technologies from in a bottom-up approach may yield better test scores. We also have to be more flexible in our training strategies. Understand that learning works in a continuum, like from school plus training or professional experience, and we have to get away from the thinking that education is a stop-and-go type thing. Human learning is not controlled by semaphores, but rather it's something that we do quite naturally. Yes, Tiro, I'll pause for a question here. And as I pause, I can comfort my throat here, so it's kind of good. Are you there?
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe you just want to type it in. Oh, there you
I
are.
think it's best way to write it down on the chat if you have any questions.
Okay.
So, but if somebody here have some questions, so we can. Yeah, I know. Tero, do you think that you can write your question on chat? But meantime, we can.
Are you guys able to
take?
You guys are hearing me okay? No problems.
Tero is asking on chat something. But meantime, do anybody have something to ask in here? I think not. So we wait. Teros.
All right.
Question.
All right. Well,
okay, here.
Okay. I'd like to hear something more about creative destruction. Yeah. Getting into creative destruction. That's because in the industrial model, it's really gears us for slow change process. They have to go through development steps. That's how the Chinese are treating education today, is that they have to go through certain steps. They have to industrialize and do these things and go through these different steps without actually just leapfrogging over things or starting over or tearing things down and creating stuff. For nimble organizations, work organizations, industry organizations, or also educational organizations, I think in the 3.0 paradigm that we're seeing a greater need to be able to engage in activities that include creative destruction that allow us to reinvent our organizations on the fly and quickly. The current cycles of economic crises, I think, really demand that of us. Reorientations of all right. I'm going to continue on here, or Taro's typing. All right, I'll continue on here. I just got about 10 more slides, I think, and it's actually, these are all quick ones at this point, so I'll be able to get to questions very soon. Let's see, it's that lifelong learning. So specifically, it's pre and post compulsory learning is our areas we need to look at. And I think that we just need to get do a better job at recognizing that learning is not just confined within schools or within school hours, but it's something that we do continuously and naturally as humans. And edupunk and edupop are two areas that are really emerging. Edupunk is taking kind of punk concepts and relies on itself to construct digital learning spaces rather than relying on others. Like, don't rely on the textbook industry. Just get it done and create your own resources. And this can use free and open stuff and find ways of connecting to the connected world or connecting in areas of multilinear learning. And EduPop is based on the philosophy that we believe in technology, but we also believe in individuals, and so it's maybe focusing less on the technologies, but focusing more on humans, the human experience, but with a very punk way of thinking. And like the revolutions that we're seeing in the Arab world, the revolutions starting in education are really emerging from the bottom up. People are leveraging technologies purposefully, and the innovators aren't accepting the status quo or being told what to do. They're just pursuing what they believe is right, and they're adopting the right tools to make it happen. Skip that. And this is a chart to some of the differences between formal and visible learning, but I'll leave that for reference so we can dive into questions sooner. Just really wanted to highlight just some of the differences that, the visible learning paradigm, it's just something we have been doing a little bit more naturally, that the cost got to be a bit lower to get more learning out of it. It can happen anywhere, anytime, and that it's conversed and created rather than being dictated to us. And then in the fourth chapter, we presented some tools and methods for studying the future, and I'm not going to get to those because that is quite detailed, but we do encourage people to do it themselves and tap the do-it-yourself movement, and that's from the 1950s to assemble the resources necessary to get done what needs to be done. And the April 2011 issue of Wired magazine had a great focus on this, and this also falls into the edupunk type of thinking. And we need to leapfrog ahead of the curve, which means showing leadership rather than catching up. And so we talk about curves of accelerating change or accelerating technological change. For humans and for the education systems, we need to start thinking of how we may want to integrate on a J prime type curve of pre-action. And this means we must start imagining the future. And so in the book, we provide some normative forecasting techniques. We talk about story tech method, the Delphi method, futures wheel, environmental scanning, genius forecasting. Most of this is kind of basic stuff, but we really want to connect with practitioners, particularly in areas that haven't had great access to futures research methodologies. At least traditionally, it's a nice introduction to it. So in lieu of conclusions, the 10 key points that we wound up with are that invisible learning is just not a single idea. It's composed of many ideas, and it's also still under construction. We need to take into consideration the tremendous impacts of accelerating change. Education and schools cannot sit still anymore. They need to take action. Invisible learning focuses on how to learn, not what to learn, because the what is always changing. We need to rethink the formal institutions of education in ways that can maybe make us a bit more open. And we need to change our discourse. Instead of talking about the sort of infrastructures that we should have, but rather we need to focus on new strategies for knowledge acquisition or knowledge transfer. And we don't have to start from scratch. There's some great examples out there, some great examples in Finland, elsewhere in the Nordic countries that have really inspired us. So I really enjoy talking to you guys. And you need to recognize education is not an event. It's part of a lifelong continuum. And I think that for those of us involved in this conversation, this is a no-brainer, but you start talking with government policymakers or others, it's a bit of a challenge. And mindware is our best technology. How do we tap into or develop our imaginations, creativities, and innovations, and focus less on software and hardware, but let's focus on developing the software of our minds. And then normative forecasting tools can help us build education futures that are relevant in the invisible learning proto-paradigm. And the final one is just to do it yourself. It's up to all of us, and that we can't wait for others to create the future for us, but rather it's up to us. So I got more at invisiblelearning.com. You can download the book. Otherwise, I'm open. Contact me, whatever, or Crucible. We're always open to discussions, questions, etc. So this is a conversation. It's not a. We're trying to make it more of a conversation rather than just trying to download stuff into your minds. So they say to always wrap up the back cover of your book. So there we go. It's the back cover of the book with both of us on there. And we've been using the hashtag Invisi to talk about this too. Hey, okay, so I got a question. Why is the book not in English? That's a good question. The book, the quick answer was that we initially intended to write this in English and then do a Spanish translation. But the University of Barcelona contacted us when we were in the middle of writing and said, hey, we want to publish it first and we have to do it in Spanish. And so we moved everything to Spanish. And then the tough part is it's really tough to translate from Spanish to English because we wrote much of it in a very Latin type of way. So we'd also have to translate the context. So what we're going to do instead is the next book is called Nomad Society. That's really focusing on nomads and nomadic workers and what we need to do. Chapter 1 from Invisible Learning is going to be translated into English, and then we'll summarize the rest of the book in another chapter. So there will be English text, and we will be getting out, and Nomad Society will come out in summer, but for the Invisible Learning parts, we may pre-release them in bits and pieces. How about crowd translating it? Hey, we'd be open to it. The book is, again, but the book crowd translation, we'd be open to that. And the book is already released in a Creative Commons license, so you guys are welcome to take any part you want, in part or whole. If you want to move it to Finnish or you want to move it to English, you're welcome to doing that. In creating an English translation, I'm reluctant to coordinate one through the crowd because then I feel especially responsible to make sure that it's consistent and the quality of translation is super high. So I'd be fearful of that. But the book it's an open book. It's a Creative Commons licensed. Take what you want, translate it, share it, remix it. If you're able to make some great use out of it, we would love to hear back from you because we're always looking at, how can we improve our message and maybe the 2.0 version of the book or future work. But it's always good to connect and learn from you. So we hope that you guys can teach us. Yeah, and Teodoro, I saw it translated quite a bit of it. Some of the best charts and graphs, at least. So did fantastic work, I think. I don't know. I can't read Finnish. What do I know?
Does somebody have something to ask here? Mic is open, so.
In the meantime, you guys tell me how the conference is going. I've been busy at this thing here, so I haven't been able to join in any earlier and see what's been going on. So it looks like a nice event.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much, John. Very interesting stuff. I think if somebody wants to ask something on chat, we have a little bit time. But if not, so we're okay.
Oh, I see a couple of typers.
There's some typing going on.
Yes. For more stuff in Finnish, do check out Taro's blog. He did great stuff. Well, thanks, guys. And I'll stay on the chat for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, you guys can contact me, email, Skype, Twitter, whatever works. So you guys have my contact information. And feel free to share the book, share the slides, or anything else. So this is for all of you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And have a nice time.
Thanks, you too.
On the Netherlands.